an IPv6 workshop along with the Puerto Rico Internet Society chapter, for whom we are very grateful, and we try to work alongside as many times as we can. And we continue to promote the adoption of technology in all of its forms, whether it's internet technology, technology in various forms, such as we have been sponsoring science clubs that are involved in terrestrial robotics, that are involved in submarine robotics. In addition to that, we have also worked very closely with different laboratories that have to do with optics. For us, it is important to make sure that we adopt the best practices, not only in administration of a CcTLD, but also the best practices in technology. An example of that is that in 2005, several months after Sweden signed its signature with the NSEC, Puerto Rico was the first country in the Western Hemisphere to adopt the NSEC. Further, a few months after that, we also implemented IPv6. So that goes to say that regardless of the size of your registry, if you are committed to best practices and to best technologies, there are many things that you can do. But I like to strive that CcTLDs are not created equal. So we all have our challenges and we have our advantages, and it is up to us to make sure that we are exploiting them to the best of our knowledge. In 2007, we celebrated ICANN 29, and then further in 2018, we celebrated ICANN 61 right after a devastating hurricane. But as many of you would have known, that PR maintained its DNS alive even before the storm, through the storm, after the storm, and it was an excellent example to all of the different registries in the region of how you can protect your DNS and remain operative during situations of this kind. We continue to work with OPSTLD to share our knowledge and to help other CcTLDs. As Alejandra mentioned, the CCNSO is a community of practitioners. And within that community of practitioners, we have an opportunity to share with others what we have learned, what works, what doesn't work, what our experiences have been. And that is one of the benefits, in addition to those that Alejandra mentioned. It's one of the benefits of participating and being a member within the CCNSO. Additionally, that PR continues to promote new forms of increasing domain registration. We continue to promote free domain registrations for professors, university professors, for teachers, for students. We provide workshops in different parts of Puerto Rico to capacitate professors in how to adopt internet technologies in order to promote their curriculum to go online, and how can they take advantage of that to teach their students and to provide them with further materials beyond the classroom. So, in a nutshell, Puerto Rico top-level domain has been involved in the forefront of technologies, as we have mentioned already, the NSEC, IPv6, and so many more that are coming down the pipeline. It is an honor for us to have an opportunity to share with you here, and we're looking forward to continue to expound on all of these ideas and further knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you. So, interesting up here is giving free domain names to professors. You should get back on the Sierra board. Okay, I have 4 questions, one for each of the panel, short, brief answers, more or less, and then I'm going to open it up to you all. I'm going to ask Kaveh, what is the role of RIRs compared to CcTLDs? Tell us what the differences are. And you've already talked a little bit about the 5 different RIRs around the world. Well, quick overview of the different categories. So how are they different one to the other?
So comparing to CcTD's, obvious thing is, of course, the CcTD's are in the business of names, RIRs in the numbers, IP addresses and ASNs. And when you look at also the content, of course there's a difference between the numbers and the names. In some of, so I'm starting from actually the content, because as you know, some of the names are vanity names, or there are this type of stuff. There's at least some registries differentiate. In numbers, normally that doesn't happen. Although there are also some vanity numbers like 1111 or 8888. But getting them is not part. RIRs don't differentiate. There is no way that you get that specific.
There are no sexy numbers.
No, there are no sexy. Yes. So yes. So that's one one core difference. When you go to the actual business, it's also different because first of all, the business model in general is fundamentally different. Normally, for a name, you pay a yearly fee, and then you have the rights to basically hold that name. For addresses, although it's different, I will get to that a bit later. But generally, you become a member of the RIR, and you get a voting right, and you're basically part of the whole system. And then you get all the resources you need, and the charging scheme, for example, in RIPE, really doesn't depend on how many addresses you have. So UK government or British Telecom pays as the same as a very small ISP, and it's an average fee for everyone. So that's also another difference. But I think the most important one is from a policy making and then regulation side, because in CcTD's you are within a country. So first of all, of course, policy make language, creating communities if you have to, or if you have a top-down governance, some TLDs, CcTD's have that. You have a clear set of goals, and also, even if you're running an inclusive multi-stakeholder operation, still it's much easier. So for example, as we heard from Josh, basically the idea of you have a country, so you say, okay, for Canada, correct? When you have a large region, it's a very different story, especially as a non-for-profit. Setting your goals is very different, because I will use RIPE as an example, because ADID has a much more stable region, I would say, but in RIPE, I will just name a few countries so you can imagine how complex it is operating in that, not only policy making, but also normal operations. We have Israel and Palestine in our region. We have Syria, Iran, Iraq in our region, and we have Russia and Ukraine in our region. And you can imagine, like even saying a member is in Ukraine, Crimea, and then Russians complain, oh, but no, they are in Russia. They are somewhere. We just giving them some addresses, but there are a lot of these, and you have to be able to navigate, correct? Because you don't want the government angry at you, so you have to navigate all of that. And normally in a CcTD, I mean, you have other issues, but these type of issues you don't have. So I think this is the core difference you have. Also, again, local policies. So when we, for example, anybody who wants to become a member and get addresses, we have to verify their identity and their registration papers. And you can imagine that's very different. So because parliaments are our members, and parliaments don't have registration papers, but we have to make sure they are really who they say they are. Or in Germany, there is a very strange type of partnership that can register as a legal entity, but nowhere else in the world there is such a complex thing. And that's also hard, because if one of the partners go out, the other one is fully liable. So there are a lot of these kind of legal issues we have to cover in contracts, where CcTD is normally, because they operate within the country, they know everything, all the rules for that country. At least if they have rules for limiting how they register some companies or organizations, that's much clearer for the CcTD case. So I hope that covers it.
Right, that's great. Just to say, politics is everywhere. It's not just about technical things, which I try to explain to people who look at me a bit quizzically when I say I'm involved in this, and they know I'm not a techie person. Okay, I have a question for Pavlo. We've heard a lot about CcTD's. But there are other types of domain names. We heard some of that this morning. But give us a quick overview of different categories of top-level
Absolutely.
domain names.
I'll be happy to. Bear with me just a moment. One more. There we go. Now, let's take a quick look at the slide above. As you can see, we have CcTD's, we have, which stands for country code top-level domains. So those are the two-letter ones that identify a geographical location. That's why they have two letters. Then you have the generic top-level domains. We don't know where they come from. They're not associated to a geographical location, and they are distinguished by three letters. The classic ones, as you can see there in the board, are .com, .net, .org, three letters. But if you look at the CcTD's, it's .ca, two letters, .pr, sexy one, and .mx for Mexico, and so on. And so, and so, there are also sponsored domain names. And which are those sponsored domain names? Look at that INT, that international. So, for example, in the Caribbean, we have the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, CTU. Their domain name is ctu.int. And, for example, we have that Asia. It agglutinates all of the different individuals and corporations that in one way or another are related to that region. There are, for example, .cat for Catalonia in Spain is also a sponsored domain name, or .jobs, which is specifically related to a organization that are involved in human development, and so on. So as you can see, there is a number of domain names that exist, but not all domain names are created equal. You could tell which identify geographical region by the number of letters that they have. You can identify those that are generic because there are three or more letters. And in addition to that, the new top-level domains, the new GTLD, the new generic ones that you have seen, like that club, that shop, that legal, and so on, that define more a service than anything else. So that's pretty much the ecosystem, the structure of the CcTD's.
Of TLDs in general.
Yes.
Right. And whereas we, at the beginning, we had about 5 or 6 classic top level, how many do we have now?
New GTLDs are about 1,300 of them.
About 1,300, right.
Of them alone.
Yeah,
And then you have, of CcTD's, we have what, 600? 250?
That hasn't exploded.
Well, the 250 times 3, because you have .com, .country code, .net, .country code, .org, .country code, so
Okay.
it breaks into many of them.
May I add something?
Yes.
There is, in addition to .ent, which is run by ITU, or by ICANN, and there is a long discussion here. But there are 3 who are GTLD, but run in US and almost only in US. It's .gov. No other government than the US government can use it. .mil. No other than the military from US using it. And the third one is .edu, who is, of course, only in US, but now that US university are all around the world, it's used all around the world. That's one point to take into account. And the second I wanted to add is that one of the questions that the geographic GTLDs, that's .Paris, .NYC, .Berlin, and so on and so forth, it's not GTLD. And you are talking about .Asia, but if we take a CcTLD who is a 2-letter code, but equivalent to .Asia, is .EU, or Europe, not Estados Unidos, or Europe, is used, it's a CcTLD. Then you see we start to have a different way of doing the same thing in the different arena of the TLD space.
Things are getting very complicated there, and this is a big thing going on in ICANN right now. There will be a new round of GTLDs in the coming time, and it really is a huge issue that a lot of people are interested in, should be interested in. It does affect you in ways it will affect you. So one of my examples would be, look what happened with .Amazon, where, .Amazon is a company that applied for a name, and suddenly there's 8 countries on the Amazon basin who's saying, hey, just a minute, we're here. This is politics, and it's incredibly interesting. Alejandra, I just wanted to ask you, and you already talked about ISO 3166, which is where those 2-letter names come from. It's a UN governed list, which is created and managed by the UN, nothing to do with ICANN. As you said, ICANN does not determine who's a country. So tell us a little bit about what happens when countries change names. We used to have a USSR.
Okay.
What happens?
A lot of things happen. Regarding the CcTLD, right now at the CCNSO we are developing a policy on how to deal with retirement of CcTLDs, like the one just mentioned, because when they cease to exist, what happens to the country code? So the policy is still under development, so when should that happen, and the steps and the processes that will be followed are still underway of being developed. But it has happened in the past. So what happens is that the ISO, the International Standards Organization, needs to find a way to create these new country codes, and then they will have a history on what country code used to have that name, but in time it could be reused. So that's what happens in the International Standard Organization. Then at the root zone, they need to be retired, and they also need to be registered these new TLDs. So that's what happens when countries split, or they just change the name like in a very different way, like super different way. It's not that they are the letter or no, they changed the name completely. So that also creates country code because they tried as much as 2 letters can to have some sort of abbreviation of that country name in the short form. Sometimes it doesn't happen, but they do try. And and when the country cease to, or they also merge. There are some countries that merge into each other, so the same process happens. The previous country code is stored historically, and new ones are developed.
I forgot also to this point, what happens to the numbers allocated to the retired?
You mean the IP addresses?
Yes, your IP addresses.
That's a good question. And outside of my scope, maybe I can have some
Yes,
help
so
here.
it's, the addresses are not assigned to countries, they're assigned to organizations. So it depends. If the organization exists, they will keep the addresses. If they dissolve, then it's get back to a pool and then gets redistributed. I also wanted to add to one point that you mentioned, just so you know, the ISO is actually an independent standardization organization. It has liaisons from ITU, but it's not a UN or ITU organization. It's actually somehow like ICANN. It's its own. It has membership from countries and technical bodies. So it's basically a self-run organization.
Yeah, it's considered an NGO.
Yes.
So
Thank you.
there is also an ISO that is an IGO, which is the International Sugar Organization.
That's different.
Can you give us
That's a sweet
can you give
one.
us a quick little explanation of .tv?
.tv.
Yeah.
Okay, well, .tv for
Which is a
Tuvalu.
weird case.
Yeah, well, they have the very, very lucky lottery of getting TV as their country code. And of course, since the television networks are very, very rich, and they want to get the domain names for, their TV shows and everything related to .tv. Of course, Tuvalu, CcTD saw the value on their domain name, and of course they can, again, since every CcTD it's autonomous and they decide their own rules and fees and procedures, they saw a business opportunity, and of course they priced their domain names as they saw them fit, and the networks were ready to pay. So that's why those domain names are the main, how do you say this, income per capita of the country.
Sure.
So,
Income
Which
of-
Yes.
country was it?
Yeah.
Tuvalu.
Tuvalu TV.
Yes, and the money goes back into the country?
No.
That's by the company, right? Okay.
Well, I'd like to chime in. There's several CcTD's that take advantage of that type of boutique domain names, right? So you have French Micronesia.fm, and so in my country, we have a radio station called LAX.fm. They have no idea there's French Micronesia anywhere, but they know that it's a FM, and that is their radio station is an FM station. And in Armenia is that AM, right? So on and on.
Okay, yeah, so country codes are not all they seem to be
I'll just
sometimes.
add quickly, we
You're
are
next to
obviously .ca, and Californians try to register .ca all the time. .ca
Except to register .ca, you have to
be Canadian
have Canadian
somehow.
presence.
Yeah, have a Canadian presence. We have Canadian presence requirements that